Hi guys, so today we're actually going to talk about relationships and also about failure and success. Relationships are, and sexuality as well, actually, we're going to talk about too. So, relationships are a complicated thing. Over the years, I've had many, or a few actually, toxic relationships, and I've had many a toxic date, and dates that have just not gone well, relationships that have not just gone well. And that could be down to them or it could be down to me. And different scenarios meant different things. So I've had 3 major relationships in my life. The first one was with my boss's daughter at the time. That didn't end very well. We ended up falling out of love. Well, I did. And I didn't handle it very well. Because rather than end it and break things off, I became distant. I became argumentative. And I just pulled away and made things more difficult than they needed to be. She was overly clingy. And yeah, things just didn't work out that time. She had mental health issues, so I wish I'd handled it better because I'm sure I had a negative effect on her. But she was a little bit crazy too. The second one was with a friend of a school friend. And that's probably my most serious relationship. It was long distance until it wasn't. I remember one night. Well, no, let me rewind a little bit. So we dated while she was at university in Leicester. We met through an old school friend of mine who had invited me up to her birthday party, and we hit it off and started dating. But she was originally from further north. We would see each other fairly often. I would go up to Leicester, she would come down to London. When she was back home, I would go and visit her there. I loved her family as well. Her family and me got on really well. But when she finished university and was heading back up north, my mum and me had a conversation about the fact that it was going to be hard to maintain a relationship at that far a distance. So we agreed, well, nothing had been agreed, but one night while we was out, my mum suggested that she moves in with us down to London, where she had no friends, no family, no job. I now realise how hard that must have been for her. So she clung to me. And all I did was push away. Because the more she clung to me, the less I wanted to be around her, because it was just all too much. It was like when I came home from work, she was in my face. She was there. And obviously she'd been on her own all day. She did eventually find a job, but by then things had already slipped down a rabbit hole, and I later found out that she was suffering with anxiety and depression as well. And I think at that point as well, I was on a downward spiral. Because this was just before I actually moved to the branch with my workplace bully, which you would have seen in one of my previous videos I spoke about. So I was already not at a good place, and she exacerbated it, and she would gaslight me when I would talk to her about the fact that I felt smothered. It just wasn't a good situation for either of us. She'd be constantly texting me every time I went out. If I didn't want her to go somewhere, so like I just wanted to spend time with my friends, she'd get the about why I didn't want her there. And then, as I say, there was things that I could have done better, but she did not make it easy. And I remember one night that I wanted some time by myself, and I was playing my game. She was sitting on the sofa reading next to me. She was watching me play as well, and then we decided, we were watching TV? I can't even remember now, but we were doing something, and then she decided to go to bed, but I was staying up a little bit later. That was it. We were watching a TV program, and she decided she wanted to go to bed, but I wanted to watch one more episode, so I stayed up. I then went to bed a little bit later, and when I've come into the room, I realised I forgot my charger, so I went back out to go and get it, and tripped over something, and woke her up. She then proceeded to spend the next half an hour punching, I don't think it was as long as half an hour, but it was a long time, punching me in the back and saying that I wasn't sleeping if she wasn't sleeping. We then got into a huge row. We argued pretty much every night. And she was only living with us for about 3 months. And we were arguing pretty much. I think the first month was alright, but after that, the last 2 months were awful. And then there was this one row because I had told her already that I couldn't do the whole arguing at night type thing because I had to get up to go to work in the morning. And it was starting to affect my work. So we got into this huge row. And I eventually just said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm incredibly unhappy. We're done. She said no. And I still to this day can't believe she said no. I mean, it's not how relationships work. It's not how dumping someone works. They can't say no to it. And I told her that I needed her to leave. Obviously not right away, like she was down in London and she had her job. Like I wasn't expecting her to move out straight away, but I was expecting her to try to do it as quickly as possible. And one of her friends did actually move to London while we were down here, so she did have an option. She then proceeded to basically not move out. It was causing friction with my family. It was causing friction with me. It was causing friction between me and my family because she just wasn't going. And one night I decided, one day I told her that basically, because she was going back home to her family for Christmas, that if she didn't take her stuff with her, that it would be following her in a DHL. I mean, she became so impossible to deal with that I actually had to become a complete arsehole. And I was. And then my third one was another long distance one, funny enough. And me and her had actually been friends for years. And I'd always had a thing for her. But we never made any movements. And then lockdown happened and we started up these quizzes. And they basically I basically tried to start dating her during lockdown, and obviously we couldn't really see each other. But when the lockdown loosened, we did travel backwards and forwards from London to where she lived. Um, she worked in a care home, and it was increasingly difficult for her to see me during COVID, um, going out and seeing my friends. I didn't I didn't necessarily break the rules. Well, I suppose I did actually. But I was hanging around with people that were tested um, regularly, like myself, because through my work I had to be tested regularly, so I was making sure that I was safe. But what didn't help is that the main ones that I was hanging out with was three girls, um, all in relationships, and it was all completely platonic. But I could understand from my ex's point of view, where she's seen all these posts on Instagram of me and these girls um, out having fun, pretty close together, and she was working in a care home, so she was seeing the effect. Um, and I don't defend my behaviour at all. As I say, we did take safety measures, but we were breaking the rules. And being that she's working in a care home, she was seeing the effects of COVID. Also, during our relationship, I was heavily drinking and doing other things, so therefore, that was having a strain on the relationship as well. And I do regret that things didn't work out because we waited so long to actually do anything about it, and then and then I screwed it up. And I have to say that she was no part to blame in the demise of our relationship. That was completely me. And that was the last relationship I had. But I came to sort of accept that I'm not great at dating. I'm not great at relationships. But a lot of that was exacerbated by my drinking, my other things that caused further problems. And I would like to think that now I'm on a better footing. But I can't say that dating is easy when you're sober. Because the normal date for me was go for a drink, because I don't like eating in front of people. I get quite anxiety about that. Going to restaurants as well, I have to look at the menus and everything before I go, so it can be quite difficult. Um, and yeah, I mean, there are other date options, but I don't have a lot of money all the time. So they do have to be fairly cheap options, and I don't want to waste a load of money on a first date when I haven't got a lot of money and it might not work out. I would rather spend money on dates later on in the relationship once we know we're actually together. But dating apps, I swear to God, they are a minefield. If anybody has any dating app tips, let me know, because they're an absolute minefield. Um, what you can do, what you shouldn't do, it's just, and also that first message. I hate sending the first message, but of course the guy is expected to send it, and yeah, it's not easy, and it does have an effect on your mental health. I mean, I'm quite happy single. I really am. But there are times when you see couples, like Christmas and New Year, they were particularly difficult because they're very coupley things, and you see couples on Instagram and you enjoying the festive holidays, and you do think you're missing out. But I am in a much better place when it comes to relationships and when it comes to my mental health and stuff. So they say that you shouldn't get in a relationship until you at least like who you are or love yourself, because nobody's going to love you unless you love yourself. That ain't true. You have to at least like yourself. Now, don't be a complete down on yourself, but not everyone has that self-confidence to love themselves, and that will build over time being in a relationship, because I always find that I'm more confident when I'm in a relationship, and I think that really helps with mental health and stuff. And you do start to love yourself. I've also come to recently accept my sexuality a bit more. I've always, like, my family, my friends, they've always been really accepting of who I am and the fact that I'm pansexual. But I don't think I ever fully have. I mean, I've been on a couple of dates with men and I've slept with men and I've done things, but I've never actually been in a relationship with a man. And I think at times I do struggle with that. But I have noticed more recently that I have accepted my sexuality a bit more and finally changed my preferences on the dating apps to include men and non-binary as well. I mean, non-binary I was fairly accepting of anyway. And also trans as well. I don't have a problem with that. Dating trans. But I think having a clearer head and working on myself has made me able to accept that a bit more. Coming out wasn't easy. I won't lie. Being able to accept me for who I was still is a work in progress. But my mum, my dad, they were very accepting. Didn't understand, but they were accepting. Friends, it's been bumpy. Most were very accepting, some not so much, and some make some inappropriate comments around me. But it is important to know the difference between homophobia and hateful homophobia, because I've learned that over the years. Because people can be homophobic, meaning that they're ignorant and they're fearful of it, and they don't understand it, but they won't be hateful against it. I had a friend that I used to work with who didn't understand it at all, but he asked questions and he was willing to learn what was acceptable to say and what was acceptable to talk about, that sort of thing. But he was never hateful towards me. He didn't come out calling me, I'm not going to say it on here, but the name, you know, the derogatory names for gay people. That can have a real effect as well. It's like people are different. It doesn't matter whether you're gay, straight, pans, trans, non-binary, whatever. If you don't understand, you should be able to ask and learn. It's like with the non-binary stuff. I know it must be really annoying when someone misgenders you. But jumping down their throat or trying to get them cancelled is not going to help the situation. People need to be educated. And if you're going to jump down their throat, they're going to be scared to do anything. Or they're going to become angry because of the way you behaved. Now, I can't pretend to understand what it is like for a trans or non-binary person, because I am not there. And I am accepting of all. I will admit, I don't completely understand non-binary and gender fluid, but I'm accepting of them to the point where they will help me understand. And you've got to remember that older generations didn't grow up with all this. I'm fairly lucky because I've come in at the beginning of it, and I'm fairly lucky that I am quite educated in terms of LGBTQIA plus. But the older generations are not, and they're gonna need some more patience. There's no excuse for hateful ignorance, but you can't expect someone to know something that they didn't grow up with, that they weren't taught about. If they're willing to learn, help them. If they're not willing to learn, there's not a lot you can do. But getting yourself worked up, angry and stressed about that sort of thing can have a toll on your mental health, and it's really not worth it. Really not worth it. You can only control your actions. You can't control the actions of everybody else. And the sooner that we focus on that, the better. If you go out there angry with the world and gonna jump down someone's throat when they get something wrong, nothing's gonna change, and all it's gonna get is hate against the LGBTQI plus community. If you go out there with an open mind and willing to educate when needed, the world will be a better place. I might get some hate from this video for what I've said, but I think it's the God honest truth, and it's what I believe. So lastly, I want to talk about success and failure. Whether that be relationships, friendships, work, your hobby, whatever. You need to remember that failure isn't a bad thing. The only way we learn is by failing. Because you know what to do and what not to do next time. I mean, you look at sports stars, Michael Jordan, Cristiano Ronaldo, David Beckham. There would have been times when they failed. But we only remember, and what only gets written about is their successes. And it's important to remember that by failing, you haven't screwed up anything. You haven't screwed up your life. You failed this attempt. So you try again. Now that doesn't relate to women. If you fail to pick her up or get her number, take the no. Yeah, but everything else in life, you get a retry. And one day you will succeed. Or maybe you won't. Maybe you realise that that's not for you, that's not your thing, that's not whatever. You can go and succeed at something else. Life is only defined by the failures if you make it about the failures. Life is mostly defined by your successes. Because when you go off this planet, off this realm, you'll be remembered for your successes. You might be remembered for your colossal failures, but you're gone, so you don't care. While you're on this planet, remember your successes. No matter how small they are, because they're all important. And don't beat yourself up for stuff that is beyond your control. Anyway, this is probably one of my longer videos, so I'm going to go. I might pick up again on this point on another day. I hope you have a great day and a great mental health day, and I'll speak to you guys soon.